It's the first really pleasant day of the summer, even though it's now late August. Warm but not overpowering or humid, and without the wind, which has been a constant up to now. The waves are big and bold and green, and swimmers can do little more than bob in the surf and squeal with delight as they are tumbled over by the force of the water. Little boats lined with fishermen chug out in the bay, gulls wheel, and the heather is rich purple in the chimes. And let's take this opportunity to go inside for a cup of tea.
Hello, my name is Peter John Cooper. There are all sorts of little groups who gather on the West Cliff from time to time. I must tell you about them all one day. For today, though, I'm going to tell you about a little group that's become a bit of a fixture lately. They make up the oldest established permanent floating card game in Bournemouth. I've always thought of myself as a writer in the tradition of someone like Damon Runyon, but even I am forced to admit that the Westcliff Green Bournemouth is hardly the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and the characters I write about are seldom called Sky or Nicely, still less Harry the Horse. However, there is one thing that ties our little communities together, and that is the oldest established permanent floating card game in Bournemouth. Well, no, probably not even that. But when 2 or 3 are gathered together to play poker or pontoon or find the lady in the shade of one of the twisted pine trees, where the weather is warm enough, then emotions can run as high and deep as ever do in the Biltmore garage after closing time. I am not a card player myself. It could be Snap or Top Trumps for all I know that they are playing, but for the guys and occasional doll that drift together on some occasions, it seems to provide a very adequate pastime. However, like all these fads that come and go, it sometimes grows in importance to the players, so that occasionally voices might be raised above the gentle sigh of the cliff-top breeze. As a general rule, money is never discussed on the West Cliff. If you have none at the moment, you never say, lest people think you are somehow on the lam. If you live in a smart apartment, you never mention it, still less go about distributing largesse and making everyone feel uncomfortable. Strange to say, but on the West Cliff, money has little or no currency, even for those poor souls who assemble near the toilets for when the dealer comes by on his pushbike first thing. Cash never seems to be passed for the little rat. It must be, I'm sure of that. But it is all very understated, very British. For the rest of the time, bottles of cider are shared, as is the sunshine and the shade. However, just recently there has been a little more excitement among those playing with the Devil's Picture book, and it turns out There's been a tiny wager of around a penny a point, or however these things are organised, and a small kitty has accumulated. They are playing for a pot which, some are saying, amounts to several pounds. You and I both know where this is going to end up as things get more urgent and the kitty increases. To the rest of us, the game seems never ending. Every morning they pick up where they left off the day before. It becomes their focus, their only interest. It continues for weeks, months even. Anyway, somebody must have given them a bit of a nudge and told them to leave off the shouting and arguing. And one of them, we'll call him Nathan, offers to set up a card game that will settle the matter once and for all, if he can find somewhere to play in the evening when all is quiet. So it is that the three of them, we'll call the other two Sarah Brown and Benny for the sake of completeness, agree to meet as the shadows deepen and darkness descends. And Nathan leads them to the cliff-top shelter where the showdown will be. Benny is taking a while to be persuaded because he knows for a fact that the shelter is haunted, but driven by the idea that there is a pot to be won and, more important, an argument to be settled, he is persuaded. So let me digress here to tell you about the cliff-top shelter. It is a simple building of the sort you will be familiar with if you ever visit any British seaside. It is basically made up of two long benches back to back, with a half-glassed panel between and a more or less weather-tight roof overhead. The whole point is to give people somewhere to sit out of the wind and rain during a typical British summer's day. This particular shelter was donated to the town back in the day by a modestly famous woman whose name and title we now entirely forget, in memory of her dear little black Labrador who took a header off the cliff edge at this point. It is this Labrador that is supposed to haunt the structure, although over the years it has become transformed in folklore to a wild, ravening black beast. The original shelter collapsed with age some years ago and was replaced by the council with a replica made of sturdier, contemporary materials. We might suppose, though, that if the shelter had been remade, then darling Marmaduke might still haunt the place in whatever guise he chooses. Anyway, the shelter is a favourite place for people with nowhere else to go to bed down and get a few hours kip on the leeward side of the bench at night. So during the pandemic, in an effort to prevent the spread of the virus among those who might spend the night here, the council has fenced the whole thing off with those tall wire mesh panels you see around building sites. But for our intrepid card players, it is only the work of a moment to free one of those long enough for them to crawl underneath. "I do not care for this one piece," says Benny. "Oh, do not be such a rabbit," says Sarah Brown as she manhandles a formica-top picnic table under the wire. "We shall have the night to ourselves. And the stars," says Nathan. And thus, undisturbed, lit only by the wavering glow of their head torches, they erect the picnic table and set to work. They have been playing for some time, and their voices are steadily rising in pitch and volume. Even Benny has calmed his fears enough to concentrate on the cards, when out of the darkness a low voice says, "May I play?" Benny makes a dive under the picnic table. Sarah Brown says, "Heavens!" starting up a little, for she is of a lapsed Salvationist persuasion and is always concerned that there may be some higher authority frowning on her sinful ways. Nathan gazes around, but informs the others that he can see nothing. The voice comes again. "If you deal me in, I will ante up my share." Benny is still cowering when head torches of the other two pick out a figure. Their descriptions later all seem to vary in specifics, but from what we can gather, there, framed against the blackness of the trees, is a tall figure. Very tall, maybe gaunt and willowy, or perhaps wide and powerfully built, clad in black. They all agree to that. He is wearing a wide-brimmed black hat pulled down over his face, although they disagree whether it is a trilby or a Stetson or, Benny thinks, a sombrero. But he is not concentrating on the hat and could inform you more about the black boots. There may be a black moustache or beard, but they all agree that in the wavering light they see the flash of a single gold tooth. And without saying another word, the tall stranger throws down a wad of banknotes and coins. "You have the wrong game, stranger," says Nathan. "We are only playing for pennies. This is between ourselves. It is a private game," says Sarah Brown. "Hardly private," says the tall figure. "You can be heard all the way across the green. Why, I even heard it on the beach below. You need to settle this matter for once and for all, if we're going to get some sleep. Those of us who do sleep." Sarah Brown examines the pile of Grisby. "Aren't you worried that you may lose all that?" says Sarah, now feeling rather concerned that the tall stranger may not be in full command of his faculties, and indeed may be on day release from some local institution or the other. "I only bet on certainties," he says from the darkness. "Oh, that doesn't give the rest of us much reason to play," says Benny from beneath the table, who has decided that in any case they are to be playing for fairy gold, and that always turns out badly. But Nathan, practical as ever, indicates a place to sit, and without further invitation, the tall stranger begins dealing the cards. Now, as if hypnotized, the others pick them up and begin to play. Benny slides back into his seat, keeping as small as possible, but soon he too is caught up in a whirl of cards and the haze of smoke. Did I tell you that the tall stranger has a small black cheroot clamped firmly between his teeth? They play as they have never played before. They are not even sure what game they are playing. They play till their fingers are sore, till their eyes can hardly count the spots on the cards, or tell which suit they are playing with, or tell a queen from an ace. Coins chink and rattle. The pile of notes in the kitty grows. They are playing as if their lives depend on this one turn of cards, as if their very eternal souls are at stake. There is no sound, just the rustle and snap of the cards being shuffled and slapped down on the picnic table. Then They can sense a quiver in the air, a trembling and shaking from the tall man. Something big is about to occur. They feel a cold fear they have never felt in their lives before. Nathan taps his finger on the back of his card lying on the table. It is the last card of the last deal, of the last game. Slowly and deliberately, he turns it over. "Good Lord," says Miss Sarah Brown. The big man stands. He towers over them, a sinister, malevolent figure. All he says is, "I'm out." And with that, he melts away into the blackness. There is a cold breeze suddenly, and Nathan, Sarah Brown and Benny shiver. It is though it has all never happened, except for the brief glow of the end of a small black cheroot burning the edge of the table. Oh, and an inexplicably large amount of notes and coins in the middle. They look at each other, uncertain what to do next, until Nathan divides the kitty in three with the side of his hand. They each take their share and crawl back under the harass and make their way home. Who is the stranger? No one knows. There are some who think he must be one of the other Westcliff wanderers who doesn't care for our little green becoming like the Lower East Side of Manhattan and was prepared to lose big to put an end to things. There are those who are of the opinion that the tall dark stranger is some well-heeled mark that has been set up by Nathan. In any case, it proves to be the end of the oldest established permanent floating card game in Bournemouth and is never mentioned again, except all the time. Thank you for listening to that number 40 in the series of Tales from the Cliff Edge. You'll be glad to know that we've been voted number 8 in the top 15 UK storytelling podcasts by the FeedSpot review site. My plan at the moment is to see if I can reach the magic number 50 before I take a bit of a break, and then return with something that will absolutely blow your socks off later in the autumn. So secure your footwear, and I'll see you next week.